Hey guys, welcome to Anti-Hedge. You're speaking to Matt, once again, the founder, and I just gotta say one thing. You should watch this video to the end if you want to know what's happening with Boson. There's a lot of things that we're going to be covering today. But before I begin and get on with that, I just gotta say one thing. This is not financial advice, and we do not accept liabilities for loss that you may incur. All these videos are strictly here for research, news, and entertainment purposes. And with that in mind, you should be able to enjoy this video. So I'm more or less just doing a follow-up on the Boson Protocol because a lot of people, they enjoyed our take on it, and I'm sure they're waiting for a follow-up, and I wanted to bring you guys the most recent up-to-date information on the project. And as you can see, we had like a little dip here, which is chill because you know what? It gives people time to load up and buy more, because I still think that the project is small and pretty undervalued as a whole. And this is probably one of the reasons as to why I think it's going to be undervalued, right? So more or less what Boson aims to do is more or less they want to create a metaverse where the boundaries are limited only to our imagination based off of, let's say, an artist or a creator's perception, right? Now, let me rephrase that. So what they want to do is they want to create a metaverse where people's imaginations, whatever they're picturing or what they want to create as a unique user experience, will be able to be sold to you in the metaverse. Now, there's a lot of ways that could be interpreted, which could be like, let's say, marketing ways, but also in ways of, like, let's just say someone decides to create a metaverse, like their own little game or creation, and you just get to experience it from their perspective. Now, that could be something that's pretty interesting because when you look at like art as a whole, we've only experienced it from like what we could see, pictures, videos, this, that. But imagine now people creating a whole metaverse, and that being quantified or interpreted as art because this is someone's imagination to tailor it as an experience for you. Now, that's pretty interesting because it's like, it's definitely one way. It's one way of looking at the metaverse that I haven't really ever thought of, and I'm sure most people haven't thought of. And that brings me back even to here. They did a live AMA, and they were basically talking about like they mentioned Tim Sweeney. We're gonna go over that. Tim Sweeney is the founder of, or the CEO of Epic Games, and you know, he was there during like the Fortnite, like when that became a huge thing. And we're gonna go over that in a bit. But one of the things I wanted to mention before I jump into that was this right here. So on their third question, they mentioned like online shopping is one of the most popular ways of, you know, buying and having goods and being serviced, right? And they basically asked, like, how does Boson aim to change that? Because it's been something that's been built into Web 2, all these payment processing options, and like how it's already like almost cemented. What makes Boson different to make things change, or want to change rather, right? And the answer for this was actually quite interesting because more or less they were going about and saying that all these payment processing companies and third-party apps like Amazon that basically just broker goods between people, they take crazy amounts of fees and they abuse their position of power because they have the name, they have the brand. You know, like, who could really say anything to Amazon is going to be the first $1 trillion company? If you try to say something, they'll just buy you and shut your company down. You know what I mean? So it's like, more or less, what Boson aims to do is they want to create an e-commerce platform where everyone could be their own e-commerce. You know, like, have it really truly decentralized in a way where everyone could be their own payment processor and creator and receive as much of the profits as possible without having to pay out to other people. And that's more or less what we're seeing here as one of the larger opportunities for this whole thing to work, actually, right? So, like, as you can see here, the sharing economy has been broken. They mentioned this in this article, and how Web 2 commerce, which is our current online infrastructure, is just designed to be run by monopolies at this point, right? And that's that's scary when you have all these big monopolies with amounts of money hoarding all the data, and being able to distort not only our markets but even seep their way into our governments and our politics and our world beyond just a measure of just what we would understand. So naturally, when you have an e-commerce platform where everyone, let's say me, Matt, I decide to sell these mugs. It's like, instead of me taking this mug and going through all the efforts of getting it on Amazon and doing all these things, it's like I become the online retailer for that mug. And then people would just send it to me, and we would basically interact through smart contracts, peer to peer, buyer to seller, and seller to buyer, eliminating a need for a company like Amazon to just get rich on everyone else's work. Now, that's an extraordinary application as to why Boson could be pretty successful in the future. And the other thing is too, is it's like you're decentralizing not only e-commerce but supply chains and a lot of other things by taking control over the ability to take control of your sales as a business, as well as grow your business from a personal perspective. Now, the other thing that I found kind of interesting about this article, and talking about how they plan on solving some of these problems. And by the way, here, before I move on with that, look, here their plan is more or less to enable a world of decentralized commerce where people share in the value they create, as opposed share in the value they create, and try to create more millionaires instead of having a few trillionaires. So the goal is to really just take the money from the trillionaires, because we're not taxing Bezos. We're not taxing anyone. We're not able to do that. It's impossible. People don't understand when someone says, oh, we're just going to tax the billionaires. All right, go and tax them. If it was as easy as you're saying to tax them, they would get taxed already. But they don't, because they buy our politicians. And when they don't buy our politicians, they take their company and they move to somewhere that doesn't require tax. So it becomes complicated. This is just something that in the future could become big to break up that kind of abuse of power. And that's going to be basically when we connect the real world commerce to Web3. And Web3 is basically like the next extension of where our internet is going to become, blockchain internet, where everyone could be their own Amazon if they really wanted to. And that's definitely something interesting, and this is more or less how it works. So it's like, once you tokenize a real world item, you get a token. So you get a token for, let's say, your car, and then you would basically lock that token into it. Let's say, or let me rephrase all that. Let's say you want to buy a car. You go to buy a car, it's tokenized now in a blockchain. It's like you decide to buy the car, you buy it, you take it, you have the token, and they have the smart contract that you're paying to. If in the future, let's say the car becomes a lemon and there's issues, it's a lot easier for you to return the token and fix it like that than it would be in the current scenario where the company is like, you have a car dealer who doesn't want to take it back, and he's like, here, let's just upgrade you to a new one. It's like, no, it's a smart contract. My end of the contract has not been withheld. It's easier for you to be able to terminate that contract in your favor, because it's upheld by code. It's not upheld by a guy who wants to sell you a car and never take it back because he knows what he gave you, which is what a lot of car salesmen and car dealers do, So it's like having a system like that in place where it's like you could trust the financial intermediary in those kinds of things by having a smart contract escrow system creates a more trustworthy future for buyers and sellers. Now, that's definitely one of the things that's interesting. They're talking about the legal engineering required to immunize the system against the legal risks. Like, judging by the looks of how this is more or less being approached from a short-term perspective, I could see a lot of potential for that. I can see a lot of potential for Boson just based off of the fact that they're even approaching these problems. Now, I mentioned too last time they wanted to do, uh, uh, basically like a virtual mall with Decentraland. That's still in the works. It's definitely still up for grabs. And what I wanted to more or less go back on to really like cement this video for you guys was this right here, Tim Sweeney. As I'd mentioned before, I put a pin in it. Now I'm about to pull the pin out. We're going right here. So what does Tim Sweeney got to say? So Tim Sweeney was the guy from Fortnite. You know, he's more or less successful in the digital space. He's done what he has to do, and he's made it clear that in order for VR and metaverses to work, we need an open and decentralized economy where everyone could participate basically in a world where we could have microtransactions that work. You know, that not only work, but microtransactions that are not like uh, overly, let's say, messed around with by a third party. Like, let's say someone wants to transfer a skin to another person, like in Counter-Strike. It's gonna be a lot easier when it's done through these kinds of systems in a blockchain where everything's tokenized. It'll be easier moving things around, moving digital assets around in an open metaverse, as opposed to, let's say, Amazon buying the whole metaverse or Facebook buying the whole metaverse and then tailoring it to be like a metaverse version of what they already have, which is basically a monopoly on our data. Now, more or less going down, he mentions that companies that are getting into the metaverse, they should embrace the idea of having an enlightened form of self-interest. Now, if I were to basically analyze that, more or less what he's saying is like the ability to embrace the idea of the company functioning well, but also appealing to the fact that we got to make things different if we want change from the current monopolies. So I think what he's getting at here is it's leaving it open for interpretation of like, this is the monopoly, this is where we're at with the new technology. We need to find a spot in between where everyone could be happy. Because this way and this way, no one's going to be happy. Because this way, nothing gets done and we're stuck with these guys. So we got to get somewhere in the middle. That's how I'm interpreting what he's saying here. Now, scrolling down, here's another thing that I highlighted, and it was something that I wanted to mention too, was the principle here is, and this is, I quote, the principle here is every creator owns their own original creations and has the right to make profit from them. And it's great to choose service providers that they could choose to work with without being forced to accept a massive bundle of services in order to reach the customer base. We want each component of the system to stand out on its own merits and not use dominance or significant market power in the space to force adoption. That's beautifully spoken, by the way, because more or less he's saying that we shouldn't be forced to adhere to the same rules, or not rather the same rules, but to the same chains and shackles and institutions on the outside as they should on the inside of VR. We shouldn't allow this opportunity of a new metaverse to be formed and just have all the same people take over not only the outside world, the current world that we're living in, but the virtual world that we're probably going to be seeing within the next 5 to 10 years. Now, that's definitely interesting. And more or less, there was another thing in this article that I read that was like definitely noteworthy. And it was this right here, the connection of VR and blockchain. So it's clear here he understands that a game like Fortnite, which pretty much survives on microtransactions because it's free, it's almost in the interest of the company to be giving out free games, in my opinion, knowing that they could give microtransactions for fractions of a penny for all the little skins that they like, and then making those skins and all these things interoperable amongst each other. That's where I think this whole thing is going to go, right? And more or less, you're seeing a more and more clear connection to virtual reality, metaverses, and blockchain, because that kind of system is the only way that we can facilitate those kinds of microtransactions at all times, every second, going crazy. So that's definitely something that I could see becoming big in the future, because having all our data spread out as opposed to in the hands of a few big people, and then allowing us to build trust within a smart contract system, so that way it's like we could just basically interact with each other instead of with third parties for trust. We'll be looking at a much better system now than the one we're currently looking at, because we'll be cutting out a lot of people who are getting fat on the idea of eating off of everyone's move. You know, it's hard to enjoy a pie when everyone's sticking their finger in it, right? Now, more or less, that's the interesting thing that I wanted to mention about the metaverse. And to wrap up this whole video, like to basically like finish up on this boson thought, was this: most of, and I'm quoting here, the advantages from this website. Most of the significant advantages from Boson Protocol is that it removes the intermediaries from the system, thereby giving the users more power. It also reduces the cost incurred by the users and gives them access to the data. However, it's still too new in the crypto world to give a complete like idea of when it'll launch, but they're estimating in 2022. So we'll only really know how well this could do once it launches and it starts being integrated. But if Tim Sweeney mentioned Boson Protocol, and or he's mentioned in all their articles, and they're mentioning that this kind of system that they're creating needs to be done in a metaverse, it's only a matter of time before Epic Games, you know, starts implementing a blockchain. And which blockchains are going to be the choice for that? Hopefully it's Boson, because then that'll be some big market share entering that space. Now, if you stuck with me to the end of this video, I hope you enjoyed it. I want you to leave a comment, like, comment, and subscribe. If you have any questions or things that you want answered, don't be shy to leave them in the comments. And relatively soon, we're going to have our Patreon set up with exclusive content for the people who decide to sign up. Basically, the Patreon would consist of live seminars, Q&As, AMAs, all that, as well as live strategy guides, breakdowns of technical analysis. It's basically just going to be content where you can see what I'm doing when you're not seeing me on the YouTube. So enjoy, guys. Have a good night.